about e-commerce. Their names are David Kutcher, and he works for Confluent Forms, and David Amerland, and he is a really important author on Amazon.com. I suggest you go out and check him. So let's start off with David Kutcher, and he'll go ahead and introduce himself.
Well, hi guys, my name is Dave Kutcher. I'm the co-owner of Confluent Forms LLC. We're a web design, web development, and online strategy, online presence management company up in Western Massachusetts. We've got clients all over the world, I guess now. Been in business since 2002, and yeah, having fun. You know, every project is a challenge these days, which is keeping us busy, keeping us excited.
Great. Okay. And David Amerland.
Hi guys, I'm David Amerland. I write books about SEO and online marketing and advise a number of Fortune 500 companies on strategy in the same sphere. And we're tackling something really important today in terms of e-commerce and semantic web and semantic search. So hopefully we'll get to some really good pointers.
Great. All right, so let's begin with our first topic, and that is on the query intent and how one might go about that. Go ahead, David K.
Sure. So I recently put out a case study talking about a project my company did for a small business called Michelin Metals. And one of the challenges we found is you have a small business, doesn't want to basically put a lot of money into AdWords, but still wants to get valuable results. And one of the things that we hypothesized about a year ago when we started this project with the company was, what if we really made their results look different than their competitors? When we looked for the products that people were looking for that would lead them to the products that they sell, different types of metals, for example, how can we take their queries and make them stronger? And one of the things we focused on was ignoring the general queries, the general keyword queries, and instead thinking about the user's intent. So their user would never just query the metal. They know the metal. They're actually looking for specifics of the metal, whether that metal is in the shape that they need it to be, whether it's a round bar or a tube or plating, and using that because we know what their intent is. Their intent is to buy, because if they're looking for the metal and the format that the metal is in, then they're obviously looking to buy it. So that was what we really honed in on how can we speak to that user intent in their query and knock it dead every time with that query. So we started changing the meta tags, the title tags, the schema, everything to really focus on that intent. And what we found is that we got a higher level of click-throughs. And as we got a higher rate of click-throughs, we got better positioning. And as we got better positioning on the intent-based queries, we started getting better positioning on the more general queries as well. So it was this great strategy that we undertook of really honing in on those little queries, the really intent-driven queries, which yielded us a great conversion rate as well. But then it also had that secondary benefit of boosting us in the general queries as well. So it was that intent that we honed in on that really changed the strategy and really changed the way that that whole website operated.
Interesting. So what is your take on that, David Amerland?
Well, that's brilliant. This is a classic example of theory in practice. Now we know when it comes to semantic search that a few things really play a key role. One of them is identity in terms of the brand. And when we say identity, everybody tends to think of something really generic, but really identity means something very specific to the person looking for it. And in order to establish this, you have to step outside your brand or your business itself, which you know inside out and you tend to think about in technical terms, and actually walk it through, as David K did, with the potential customer's eyes. So when they're actually looking for something which you want to sell, well, they're not really doing research at that specific moment in time if they're using terms which you know are very specific to your business. They're looking for something to satisfy a particular need that they have. And they need to be convinced that you're the best choice available from all the available choices that come up. So if you offer them a generic description which simply creates more work for them, where they have to work hard to differentiate you from your competitors, then you're making it a lot harder for them to make the purchasing decision in your favor. And another thing which David K just explained, which is really important, click-through rate certainly is important. It begins to become a ranking factor, so then it has a halo effect for the business. But all that will come to nothing if the landing pages which the customer actually goes on, or the potential customer, don't satisfy the need, haven't got a low friction threshold in terms of completing an action, and make it hard for them to actually get where they want to. So there's a holistic approach here, which essentially, it makes perfect sense. I mean, we should have had this from the beginning when the web came into existence, but we haven't for many different reasons. Some of them come with tradition, some of them are locked into a mentality of impressing visitors with technicalities and design elements instead of functionality. But the moment now that we're getting into the practicalities of this, the fact that David K. just beautifully illustrated comes into play, and that's the key to it.
Well, I think what's interesting is, back in the day, even up until a few years ago, we would still use Google and search in the way that we used to do at a LexisNexis terminal, with keywords and junky phrases. But now, and I think Google put out a great video the other day, Micro Moments. We search in full questions now. We speak to it as if it's a human being that's going to answer our question, and in doing so, we're giving all these additional semantic, markup in that query. We're telling it so much about what we intend to do that now Google is trying to divine our intent from that query. And exactly. I think one of the great examples that they had in that video was, my car isn't starting, what do I do? I'm going to query, my car isn't starting. And then it pulls up the answer box, and then there's a link to AutoZone, and there's an AutoZone video on how to check if your battery's dead, and here's the nearest AutoZone, and here's where you can buy a battery. And it's that great movement from that micro moment of picking up your phone to make the query to fulfilling that user intent to making the sale as a secondary thing. It's that great transition from point A to point B to point C that you really have to strive for.
Yes, absolutely. And again, this is an important point. Essentially, what's happened, there are two factors at work. First of all, we all have fragmented attention spans because, and this is studies indicate this is a natural trend. This is how we are actually hardwired to operate. So sticking to a site and going through all 50 pages to understand what the brand is about is not how we actually access anything on the web. So in the micro moments, essentially, we're looking for answers, and we're looking for quick questions to those answers. Brands that consistently supply those questions to us, even if at the moment they do so don't lead to a purchase, gain our attention and gain our trust. And ultimately, in the long term, those brands will benefit from our purchase decisions simply because we trust them and we know them, and we have come to rely on them. And again, David K. gave a beautiful example with the micro moments where getting an answer which will not lead to a purchase brings the attention of a company to your mind, so when it comes to making a purchase, they're there.
I got a few questions. I was doing some experimenting with a client just recently, and we were trying to list on the same page and with the same proximity as Amazon listing, and I found that the products that already had reviews that outranked Amazon were actually showing higher than Amazon. And then the second was, I wanted to know about if we do in code like product color or product texture, and it's this long, this wide, and it weighs this much, and or this many, this volume. So if I wanted to say, where can I buy Chanel No. 5, 2 ounces, or where can I get a size 12 red dress?
Yes.
Which in Schema you can do product color and things like that. How can that help with designing your query intent part?
Okay. There are two questions here inherently. And I apologize, an alarm in the background going off. It's gone off. Okay, I mean, essentially the first one is whether we should apply schema. And schema can get pretty granular in many ways. There are two. There's an inherent element, an inherent problem there. The problem is that sometimes schema is not easy to apply. So unless you are actually adept at programming or you have access to somebody who is, this may be a no-no. Secondly, schema applied across products and product pages and websites is not always are respected equally by Google. They essentially choose what to show and what not to show, and it's a fairly arbitrary approach, which at the moment has many people perplexed. And we don't quite know why Google chooses to do that or what criteria it uses. But this is something we need to bear in mind. Having said that, schema is W3C approved and Google approved generally. And if it could be applied, if it can be applied, it should be. And then wherever possible, we should also take the trouble to create, if possible, a human description which goes with the product, which can also be read by a person, which also be picked up by Google as text, which is human visible. And by doing that, by taking this approach, we basically cover all bases. And I love the fact that you said, you begin to quantify quantities, because that's exactly the granular approach that people looking for something practical will use. They won't use so much generic terms because they know they're going to get generic results. They want a quick answer to something very specific. And it very much mirrors the approach that David Kay applied for Michelin metals.
Well, I think it's also good to remember that, just because you've put on schema into your markup isn't the end-all and be-all of making it friendly from a semantic perspective. I mean, take for instance, someone who's looking for a mirror for their hang up on their wall. They're not just going to search for mirror. They're going to search for a specific function of that mirror. A wall mirror, a standing mirror, a oval mirror, a square mirror, a mirror of certain dimensions. They're not just going to search for mirror.
And it should be in the product title.
Just putting it into your markup as, here's a mirror, and it comes in these sizes and this shape, and it's made of these materials, it doesn't put those all together to create I want a bamboo mirror that's oval in shape and 3 feet long. It doesn't mash it up. It's still up to you, the person putting that product in, to make it human-friendly and make it descriptive in a way that the person who's querying it would know what they're looking at without seeing the picture. And that's part of it, is that you need that step further than just schema. You can't just rely on schema to give you that.
You said like a bathroom mirror, right? Pretty much bathroom mirror. Okay. So in the title, if I was a new store owner, so I would put bathroom mirror, and then I would set up my attributes if I'm selling different sizes. And from the user's perspective, all they're doing is putting in the measurements. And on the back end, which is already included in some of the software, we'll describe that in data structure. So if you had 5 different sizes for a mirror, a bathroom mirror, and your query was, I need a 5-foot by 6-foot mirror, bathroom mirror. I'm matching it from the text in the product title and description, and from the data structure. Is that what you're saying?
Perhaps, but perhaps take it a step further and even make it so that while that mirror might come in multiple sizes and shapes and has a main URL, that someone could also direct link to that mirror, but in a specific size and format, which would generate a unique title which has those formatting things in the title tag, and that way they're all condensed into one piece.
PrestaShop does that. When you set up your attributes, you can have a unique URL just for an attribute. And they also have a block layer which will filter results. So if you're looking at a category and you want all mirrors that have a width of 5 feet, that presents a unique URL, and then funnels down the products that are in the category and makes it so that they can pick out which one they want from that.
Right, but what I'm saying is, like, while one mirror might come in 5 different formats, you might want to give each format of that mirror its own unique URL, and have those formatting differences roll up into the title tag, so you're not, like I said, not relying on the micro formatting and the schema to give you those attributes, but your title tag has all of those attributes into it, so that the person knows and is searching for this, and that title tag comes up in a Google search as being the specific mirror that they're looking for that matches their search query intent.
I'll have to see that it works, because I know that that it gives a unique URL for each attribute, and you can have a title, meta description, and a meta tag, but it's still one parent product page. So Acme widget is just got a product description, product title, and then it's got its attributes listed below. But I'll have to go back and discover in the software that I focus on how that would be, because the alternative you're talking about is to actually create individual products in a category where other software would use attributes.
This is where I would say, is it a fault of the person querying, or is it a fault of the way the software is programmed? And I would say that it's
every software I've come across does it the same way, though, so far, unless you add it in as an individual product.
Caught up. And you see, this is where you can improve the user experience, because you'd be able to give a intent-driven query that gets an intent-driven specific result, which brings the person right to the product they're looking for. You don't have that person now, doing options and toggling things, but they go right to their product, right they want. Hit checkout.
Yeah. I think there's an interesting point that's coming up. I mean, David K., you're absolutely right in terms of, yes, we could do it or should do it that way. Denver, you're right in terms of the most software, like off-the-shelf software, has limitations in that respect simply because they haven't visualized that approach. And here we're in semantic search where ontologies actually matter. So if you have one mirror product, for instance, which has certain variations which create 100 different uses, and you use a traditional approach to it, you essentially have one product with some flavors, and you miss out on the large number of queries which can potentially come from that. And how do you overcome that? Well, it gets interesting. If you can't use the software itself to overcome it, you'll have to be clever with your content. You have to create specific content which actually addresses this, which then begins to be reflected in visibility in search queries, so it comes up, and that creates the ontology within your site, which begins to give you weight. And at the end of the day, ontologies add to expertise, they add to authority, and then that begins to help your ranking. So it's being clever by understanding what is required, and then finding ways to work around the limitations. And if you don't know programming, and not everybody does, then you have to work clever with that.
Yep.
Okay. Anything else that you wanted to talk about on user query?
Well, I think we covered pretty much a lot. Pretty much everything about it. I mean, we have to keep in mind that there are a lot of queries which come up in possible combinations from an end user point of view, which we can't always address because of the number of users and the particular circumstances and the limitations in their knowledge or not, which makes it really important to be as exhaustive as possible in the value of the content that's generated about a product. So instead of creating thin content where we create X number of words and we have specific attributes there because they're a requirement, we actually go out of our way to describe the uses of that product, because then the potential of that page to come up as an answer in search for a query which is not specified specifically in the word content but is implied in the user who actually created increase quite significantly. And again, this is an approach which David K., looking at his case study, he actually understands very well. I think his company did a fantastic job in stepping into the shoes of the potential customers, looking for products for their clients, and they actually apply it. And because I see so many different companies and agencies across the world, I sometimes wish everybody had his understanding of this.
We were. I was actually talking to a potential client today, a lawyer mediator in my area, about their website. And one of the things I was encouraging them to do is go out and get reviews of, satisfied past clients of his. And one of the reasons I talked to him about was that, even if you don't have a definitive list of all the services and types of situations that you've successfully mediated, if you get these people to leave reviews, whether it's on your Google Plus page or elsewhere, and it's all pointing to you, each one of those stories that they add to of the services you provided that links back is adding that additional semantic markup. It's adding that additional value in all the things that you could be associated with. And I think one of the more recent algorithm updates, which unfortunately backfired for Google, but was using all of this information that points to something else to redefine it, to give it more definition. So if you have, for example, this mediator, and one of the things he never talks about is neighbor mediation between two neighbors that are having a fight, for example. By one of his clients leaving a story as a review talking about this neighbor mediation, it's giving that extra value. It's providing that additional information that you might have left off your website or not talked about in your product. And that's why I encourage all my clients to go out and get reviews. Encourage them to talk, fill it in. Don't just say, like, he did a great job. Explain why. Tell me a story. Yes. Give me some details, because the more details, the richer the description, the better it, the more it helps me. So
yes,
yeah. Doesn't that flow into capture, on capturing the click by increasing reviews?
Well, yeah, I've got a slight objection to the word capture, although I totally get what you're saying, and we haven't used an alternative. But it still reflects a mindset where we sort of funnel things towards something which logically will convert. Again, there's the word conversion, but ultimately, it's not about capturing, it's about gaining attention and then convincing through trustworthiness that you're the best option. And again, David Kay used the example of reviews, absolutely critical, simply because if we say anything on our website as a business, well, what are we going to say? That we're the best of the best of the best, we're doing the best job possible, right? We're not going to say we're a mediocre business asking a lot of money for the service. But independent reviews always convince, and Google actually has figures which show that when it comes to being convinced in the social web, I think it was as high as, and I'm working from memory here, so I'm not 100% sure now, but I think it was as high as 92% of the times, we actually become convinced by word of mouth from people we know or trust in our social web, as opposed to an advert or a website-initiated contact. And this is perfectly understandable. We create circles of trust, and those carry weight with us. So if we see independent reviews, then we are more likely to be swayed by, to be persuaded in terms of the value of a service or a product.
Okay, so it's only partially true that reviews help capture the click.
Well, yeah. Well,
if I see an item online and I'm looking at, I want to get it. I'm looking at price and I'm looking at reviews, and if one company has 72 reviews and the other company has 3 reviews and the same price, I'm going to click on the company that has the 72 reviews.
Yes. Okay. I mean, you're bringing up something really complex now, which is the end user psychology. It's never quite as clear-cut as that. Essentially, I mean, if we look at the weight of reviews of something, we are likely to see what the latest review is. So suppose there is a product, there are 2 products which are identical. One is slightly cheaper than the other, and one, as you said, has 3 reviews, and the other one has 72. And of the 72, the very last one, which is the most recent, is actually negative. So suddenly, the impact of that on us is beginning to change. If it was buried in the past, we think, oh, but if it's recent, we'll think, well, has something changed? Is the product different? Have they, did they start out well, then things went south? So all these things actually come up. It's a very complex algorithm. Trust is a very, it's a very hard to calculate quality because it is affected by many variables. However, if we get into the social web, and I know you and I trust you, and I know David Kay and I trust him, and if I'm researching something and I've seen that David Kay has actually given it a review, suddenly my trust in that product is transferred because I know David Kay, and without having any idea of how knowledgeable he is about it, the very fact that he gave it a positive review begins to sway my purchasing decision to a great extent. And that's exactly the value of the reviewing power that David Kay mentioned. Certainly, as a number of reviews help, but let's not forget that it's also the social impact in social circles, that nobody these days works in a vacuum. Everybody's connected to a social network. That social network is impacted by that connection. So having reviews which can potentially be just 1 or 2 degrees away from you in terms of connection can be very positive for a business.
Well, getting to reviews one more second. For example, my wife owns a Pilates studio, and I was encouraging her to get reviews from a lot of her students. And some of the reviews talk about a person who was training for the marathon, and they had some issues with their body in training and getting loose and everything else. But they wrote a great review how at this, I think 65, 70 years old, they ran their first marathon or their first triathlon. So they wrote this long review talking about what they were just doing. And if you were someone that was in that same situation and read that review, that context of that review changes everything about how you're now interacting with this potential company to hire. Because you're looking at it going, well, that applies to me. So even if her website, her company website, never talked about training a triathlon, a 70-year-old triathlon athlete, this review added that value. It added this context, this markup that wasn't even part of the website, was in this review, but has now changed the entire discourse around the person searching, their intent, their situation, and going right to, I need to call them because clearly they know how to take care of people like me. And that's...
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
Yep, and that connects that points all together as one.
I had a question. So you said because they keyed in those extra words on the review, that it associated their brand then with that concept. Wouldn't it take several reviews with the same terms to begin to associate that domain with that concept? Mr. Amerland?
Well, from a search point of view, certainly. And there are countless examples of web pages coming up in relation to a search query that actually have a number of comments which associate that content of the page with something which is not specifically contained in a page. So just one comment won't. But from a human user's point of view, I think the example David Kay said is absolutely fantastic. If you get to that page and there's somebody who has a very empathetic kind of content describing their experience at a very human level, suddenly removes several barriers to doing business with that company. And that's exactly the power of a really good review. I mean, we're talking about search, we're talking about search terms, we talk about the affinity of connections and concepts, but at the end of the day, that conversion comes to the convincing and trustworthiness, which is a very human factor.
Okay. That makes sense. Because I've got a customer that sells independent living items, so maybe someone brought one of the padded bathroom cushions, and it's described maybe an adult child about their positive review, and the words they use may be different from a registered nurse who bought it for one of their home care facilities, and some of the words that they use are related into their industry. So you're saying if another nurse comes in and reads that review, then they've made the connection with that other reviewer to close the sale.
Yes.
Or sometimes it's so simple as, let's say you're Home Depot and you sell 24 different types of drills, and someone could be leaving drills, reviews on these drills talking about the variable speed and its efficiency and blah, blah, blah. And somebody just leaves a review that says, this drill has never failed me. It will drill through anything you want, and it will never fail you. You would pick up that drill. You would go, that's the drill I'm buying. Doesn't matter about the rest of it. It does the job, and this guy swears by it.
Relates to all the Tim the Tool guys.
Yeah, it's very human, isn't it? Really, I mean, that's what it is. And
and that's the part that we usually miss. That's the part that we usually miss when we talk about search engines and all these other things. Is we forget there's a user behind the keyboard making the search query. We forget that part because we're so focused on keywords and density and that.
And on that point, I think that's exactly the value of a modern professional today working with somebody, with a company or an entity, in terms of helping with visibility. In the past, it used to be about creating the right keyword density and keywords and H1 tags. And really today, when you hire a professional, they should be basically hiring an extra degree of awareness of how people make purchasing decisions on the web. What is it that actually convinces them to buy? What is it that gets them to your website in the first place? What is it that will convince them once they're there to actually make a purchase? And these are very much needed, very critical soft qualities within inverted commas, but they're critically important and they're very difficult to define. If you're working in the business, you certainly can't work on it to that degree. You're going to go wrong. You're going to focus on the wrong things. You're going to apply different metrics which really won't count. So coming back to what David Kay said, if you're making a decision, should you work with a company? To help you do that, you need to be aware of their expertise in that area. You need to be, to actually understand that they're bringing in a whole lot of skills because their eyes are on the web. They see the trends that are developing. They understand what motivates people to do specific things, and they can actually help you achieve that.
Okay, Mr. Kutcher, could you talk about capturing then, since I didn't quite get it on target?
Oh yes, it's capturing them. It's the never-ending battle for the client. How do we make it that we're able to win them over when they actually land on our website? And I look at it as I'm a soft sell kind of person. I rarely talk about the sell into the end. I want to give the person as much value as possible. So if you read my blog posts, they could be 3,000 words or whatever. You get to down to the bottom, and that's the only time that I talk about it. I'm like, you've read this. You obviously read it all the way to the bottom, so clearly you think it's valuable to some extent. Why not call me? Or let's talk about your project. At the same time, you have other situations. Michelin Metals, we have so many calls to action on that page because we want to make sure that the person doesn't miss it. That we realize that we've gotten them to the page that they wanted to be on, so now it's just a matter of making sure they don't miss the click to call or click to chat or fill out the form. And it's different on every situation. It's different for every project. The important thing is looking at, in my opinion, looking at the user flow, looking how the user came in and what they're trying to do, and making sure that you help them find their value first before you interject what you're trying to get out of the relationship. I often talk about creating a matrix of goals, the goals for the user and the goals for the business, and making sure that they intersect at the end of the day. You would just want to make sure that every user that comes in finds their value, and then you can not convince them, but segue them to reaching out to you, to reaching out to buying the thing afterwards. We talked about in the beginning the micro moments with my car engine won't start. If you provide a video and then the person realizes, yeah, you know what, I should probably right now order jumper cables because I don't have any. And it's those, you don't have to be shoving them in the person's face all the time. Sometimes it's just you give them value and they go, you know what, that's a good idea, I should do that too. It all depends on how your selling proposition is. But then figuring out how to put that into practice differs every project.
Yes.
Well, I just want to interject before Mr. Amerland gets in and talks about this. It's a lot different on an e-commerce software package because you have, with the major ones, you just have basic content management where you can put your terms and conditions, your warranties, and things like that. So you're stuck with top layer navigations, side navigations, product category pages, and product pages. So if you don't have any way to write a 2,000-word blog entry and a soft sell for call now to speak to a sales representative or click for follow-up, how would we do it in an e-commerce software package?
So one of the clients I worked with does e-commerce, and what we did was we worked with them to create the concept of vignettes, where essentially they would put together your entire dining room from the dining room table to the plates to the napkin holders to the glasses, and they would put together these packages that you would look at this vignette, this final picture of what my dining room could be in the most perfect sense, and present you a vision. And that vision would then be shared through social media because everyone would be looking at it going, wow, I should pin this to Pinterest and share it on Pinterest, share it on Facebook and like it and everything else. But then you would go to that landing page that's this vignette and you would see all the different products that were in that picture, and they would be all lumped together, and you would go, oh, I like this picture, I'm going to buy 5 of them and 2 of them and 3 of them. It's not just about the product by itself always, but ways of repackaging it and showing it in a way that gives it, you know, it's not just semantic value from the sense of keywords and descriptions, but putting them all together as a finished dining room set. You know, being able to see a whole vision. You know, you're making these different products relate to each other. You know, which is a kind of
and that will work. In PrestaShop, you can create a pack product. So if you've got your chairs, you've got 6 chairs, you've got a 15-foot table, and you've got the runner and the candlestick holders and the candles, then you can build up what you're saying, right, with building the content for a perceived gorgeous-looking dining room set.
Well, yeah, if I can come in here, because I think David K. mentioned something which is really important. He mentioned semantic value, essentially. And that's not, I mean, certainly you can interpret this in a very narrow sense and think website, content, words, meanings. But essentially, the moment we talk anything about semantic value in semantic search, the semantic web coming up, we're not talking about specific word content, we're actually talking about connections between individuals and products and the relationship between them. And the example he gave about spreading things across the social web, allowing the connections and the usage that people make of those to deliver the value of what you're doing and lead back to your website. It's exactly that kind of clever approach to content that begins to overcome the limitations of the software, and you begin to become clever with it. So you need to think, you know, this is all I can do on my site. This is, you know, this is everything that I've got. I can't change this, but how can I then deliver that experience of what the product can do, which I know from a human point of view, to its audience or to its potential audience? And using the social web in its different guises, whether it's text or content or video or photographs, is very much part of that approach. And the broader the web you actually create in terms of your reach, the more detailed it is, then the more people it will actually bring to your site who have a clear intent to do something with the product.
Okay. So what about video? Is that in the capture realm?
Well, video, I mean, video is very powerful, and we have seen as connections get faster, as devices get better, we have seen that the impact of the visual moving picture is more powerful than ever before. So the simple answer is yes, you should have something like that. But there's an inherent danger there again, that you can go for the knee-jerk reaction where you create something which is of poor quality, doesn't convince, and ticks the box called video. So essentially, the same attention to detail and quality that you apply to everything which you do on your website today should be applied to every bit of content you create. So if you create a video which is going to go on Vimeo, or it's going to be a short snippet shared on Twitter, or something that's going to go on YouTube, there has to be a clear intent behind it. It has to do something specific. It has to deliver some kind of value. Otherwise, somebody sharing a piece of video because you've just created it is not going to happen, and it's going to make no sense. It's just going to waste your time. So do bear that in mind. Everything is a tool. What you're actually trying to get to is data density. You're trying to create on the web the same kind of data density that you create offline. So if we were to meet, the three of us, in an offline environment, haircuts, the clothes we wear, what we order to drink, how we sit, a body language, a tone of voice, all that is data. It says something specific about us. A lot of it is intentional. Whether you come wearing a tuxedo or whether you come wearing a t-shirt, is a conscious choice. You're sending out a signal. In the real world, we do all these things anyway. We decode these things automatically. We make decisions about people's intent and purpose and way of carrying on an identity. On the digital plane, we've always taken the shortcut. We need a website. Well, here it is, tick. But does it do what it's supposed to do? We need content. Well, here are 500 words. But do they really deliver what we want them to say? So these are the hard questions. And again, if we go back to the examples that David Kay shared, what he did with Michelin Metals was incredibly brave, because essentially he stepped outside the company and created a very granular approach to how their content is going to be accessed by their potential audience, which went against current wisdom, where everybody else did the same thing because it's a product. And we have the example that actually paid off. He took that approach and it did work. So it requires that kind of thinking.
Well, I think also, we talk about content strategies these days, and so many people we're all obsessed with putting out content, filling the world with content. I think there's statistics, 97% of all content is never read, or something ridiculous like that. And what we forget is that a lot of the greatest value, the greatest and most valuable content is the stuff that we're not writing ourselves, but is being written about us, that is coming from these links that people are creating, that is outside of our control. How you perceive me becomes something that you tell somebody else. And that's the semantic part of it that extends beyond. No matter, I could be putting out blog posts until I'm blue in the face, but how you interpret it and then talk to other people about it and refer people back to me and say, hey, you should read this stuff that Dave Kutcher wrote, that's where the value comes from. And that you can apply that to referring links and people sharing it wherever in social media, but it's that same philosophy that you can't be in control of that content, and just because you're writing content, you're just you're filling space, you're putting stuff out there. It has to come from everyone else as well. You have to create these valuable structures through other people and relationships that comes back and adds that actual value to it. Otherwise, it's just content. It's just stuff that nobody ever reads.
That's great that you bring that up, because I had a debate with someone the other day. On product pages, you have several social buttons so that you can share it. You can do a rich pin for Pinterest. You can do a Facebook share. You can do a Google Plus share. I think you can email it. And there was one more, I forget. So it's Pinterest, Facebook, Google Plus, Twitter. So when you're saying it's not about what you say, it's about what other people say. So if I Pinterest click and I express, I really like this widget. It helped me sleep at night, and my dog was happy, and blah blah blah. Is that directly sharing more information about a store than what they had actually shared themselves on the product page?
Probably. And then the funny thing is they're probably going to share it to their collection of other insomniacs, because it's going to be titled the Insomniac Board, that a whole bunch of insomniacs are now following, and then you're going to get this whole market of insomniacs buying this product suddenly. So, you're putting it out there, and you're putting it into an audience and letting the audience do the rest. And I think that's where you have to let down your guard to let somebody else add the value, not just you.
And it doesn't require the store owner to be involved and active. So if they just in this instance, if they do nothing else and people really like the product and it's going viral in Pinterest shares and it's converting to sell, could that work? Does the owner have to get involved?
That's exactly. Learn how to get involved and learn how to listen. That's where the store owner should be listening to social media and practicing good social media listening and seeing, okay, well, where are these people coming from? Where are these links coming from? Is there something that's tying them all together, that they're providing this clue to this market that I need to tap into, that maybe I should incorporate these keywords and things into my description because there might be this great market of insomniacs that love this product that I really need to tap into, but I wouldn't know it if it wasn't for happenstance that somebody found it and shared it to a board of insomniacs.
So technically, you're talking about going to analytics and looking in the social acquisition, finding out what links were being shared on Pinterest or Facebook, and then going and engaging that share as the store owner.
Yeah,
right.
Exactly. Either engaging the share or incorporating it back into the product description and everything else. Yes. Okay. And that's in analytics and webmaster tools. Doing that really great listening to find out what's driving that traffic.
Mr. Amerland.
Okay, quite a few things you touched upon here. The first one, and David K. brought it up, is lowering your guard down and trusting others to add the value. What happens when you take that approach? The inherent fear comes up, whether it's a small business or a large one, that they're losing control of their brand. And because they're so attached to their brand, because they're so monolithic in their vision about what it stands for, they are very reluctant to trust their audience. And it's a mistake, but they all make it until they're forced to change. How do we address this? Again, if we take it offline to the example of the three of us meeting, essentially we have a conversation. In that conversation, we all make sure that we get the right picture, we project the right image, we project the right values, we connect with the other person. This is not about creating an artificial reality where you project something which you're not, because eventually you can't sustain that. But actually lowering your guard sufficiently to allow each of us to understand that despite the title David Kutcher, CEO, Denver Prophit, super programmer, David Amerland, author, analyst, we're just people, and we have very human concerns, and it's the people that actually make the connection. And the moment that a brand can actually project that, create the shared values with its audience, then it doesn't have to micromanage every online conversation. It has to have the trust that it has given sufficient information for the people who go away and run off with it to actually reach the right decision and say, hey, this brand is really cool, they do these things, or this business is absolutely fantastic because they have done this and have given us evidence, we trust them. It comes again back down to trust, and trust traditionally is analyzed through 4 steps. It's a contact, perception, assessment, which leads to connection. And everything which we do in terms of, and it sounds a little bit manipulative when we break it down like this, but it's not really. It's essentially a tool which allows us to create a trustworthy presence on the web, and that allows connections to be made which lead to an eventual outcome which solves a problem for both business and customers. We say traditionally, and we've been saying this for some time now, that we want businesses to behave a little bit more like people. Well, we don't want them to be our buddies, but we do want from them sufficient information to actually reach the same kind of decision as we would if they were a person, to understand who are they, why do they do the things they do, what do they stand for, are they going to rip us off and run off into the sunset, or are they going to actually be there when things go wrong with a product we purchased on the web. And we also say people should be a little bit like businesses. We just want them to be a little bit more consistent, perhaps less emotional sometimes. But these are the things which we actually face. And again, to bring it back down to David K's example, and I keep coming back to that because it's a textbook case in terms of the application. And I know it wasn't easy to implement. It took a lot of thinking and a lot of courage. Essentially, he stepped into the customer's shoes and he delivered the kind of content which allowed them to create a sense of trust in a company which they saw side by side with many competitors. When they went through search, they had to pick it out from there. And when they went on that page, then they had to start trusting it more because it actually delivered things in language they understood, and it gave them the idea that somebody actually cared enough to give them things in plain English. Here's what the product does. This is what you want. This is how much it'll cost. Give us a call. So, that approach is exactly what's required. The fact that we're talking about it here shows that it's not easy to implement, it's not easy to achieve in the first place. It requires a lot of thinking. And obviously, because it's unique every time, a little bit of experimentation, this is where the analytics comes in, and this is where the knowledge of the psychological points on the web actually kick in.
Okay, we're coming down the last 10 minutes or so, and we still haven't covered conversion.
Conversion.
Well, I think everything we've been saying so far comes down to that. David K achieved conversions. Why? Because he made sure the The calls of action were there. They were visible. They were not in your face, but they, if you needed to find them, you didn't have to jump through hoops. He did it by establishing trust in the content, trust in the company. And if you need to convert today, you don't need a landing page. Back in 2003, 2004, there was an explosion on the web of the long pages, which used to get you on a landing page, give you something, and then say, $49.99, but for 10 days only $29.99. And then you would get a little bit further down and be still not convinced. We also throw in $200 of free software. And then a little bit further down, still not convinced. We also give you a free coupon. And you used to think, what the heck? This makes sense from a marketing point of view, somebody banging on, but from a customer point of view, it never does, right? We were never convinced by those pages. So essentially, when it comes to conversion, what do we need? We need a sense of the company we're doing business with through a web page, essentially, is ideally suited for us to do business with, i.e. they know what they're doing, they're professionals, and then that they're human. If things go wrong, and invariably things do go wrong, we're talking about transactions carried out online. Sometimes we choose to buy variables, which products with many variables, and we can't always get it right. If things go wrong, they're going to sort it out. They're not going to say, oh, look at the terms and conditions. You can't ring us past midnight, and you can only talk to us on a Wednesday if the south wind blows, at a particular speed. So these are the things which, we don't need anymore. We just want to have a sense of trust in that connection to actually work for us.
I think part of it also is, I like to use the phrase from the Oracle of Delphi, know thyself. But at the same time, you have to know
Yes.
you have to know your user equally as well as you know yourself. You have to know how they want to interact with you. I have some blog posts on my company's webpage that I've written that are, I know the average read time is 10 minutes. But I also know that 80% of my readers make it all the way to the bottom. And I also know that I have a high conversion rate on those pages. At the same time, I know that on some of my clients' pages, my clients' websites, the average session is 30 seconds, that people don't want to be mucking about. They just want to find what they need, add to cart, and check out. It really does, it's all about knowing your audience and knowing how they want to navigate, how they want to experience. There's some companies that I love, Schoolhouse Electric. Is one company. When I get their catalog, I want to flip through and look at all the pictures. It's not just I'm picking one out and I'm going to buy that. I actually want to look at it. I want to experience it. I actually follow them on Instagram. They're one of the few companies I follow on Instagram. I want to have that experience, and that's how they've built brand loyalty with me. And that's how when I go to their website, I don't want to just buy one thing. I want to buy a lot of things, which is a problem. But it's you have to know your audience and know your own product and know how to best converse with them. And sometimes it's a fast conversion, other times it's a slow conversion. How you have that conversation is different with everyone. It's like I said earlier, my sales tactic, I am the softest of soft sales. I don't hard sell anyone. But that's part of it. You have to know what your sales strategy is, what your voice is, how you interact with your audience, your customer, your client. And that's how that all factors into conversions. Because if you have this great product that people really want to spend time on and you're shoving sales messages at them, it's going to have the opposite effect. It's going to, chase them off. And the flip side is also true. If they're looking for, I just want to buy a widget and get out of here, and they can't find the add to cart and the checkout box, same thing. Mm-hmm. You just have to know how it works and know that context with the person.
I think that goes into design as far as unified design elements on where your cart is up here in the top right, and you got a number over here on the left, and it always is there on every page, and get a navigation structure here. One thing I wanted to ask for is as we're coming to a close, you talked upon the speed. You want to get out fast. I've seen some sites where categories are buried 5 and 7 levels deep, and it gets really, really bad. So, and I try to nudge people on, look at ontology and You know, an apple is a fruit, and fruit comes from what? Or you're in the milk comes from the dairy aisle when you go into the grocery. You're not looking for coconut milk aisle. So would you say that factors into conversion on how fast they can find your product?
Sometimes they never click on those categories, and that's where it comes down to looking at your Google Analytics and saying, look, are people actually clicking on the categories? Or are they navigating product by product and going to the related products, or are they never clicking on the related products? Without being able to look at your analytics, and I hammer home the mantra of actionable intelligence, gaining actionable intelligence from your analytics. You never know what people are clicking on and doing without actually being able to pull up the metrics to see what they're actually clicking on and doing.
Mm-hmm.
So sometimes in that selling conversation I was just talking about, categories never come up. It's not a thing. Sometimes they come in through a product and they're so in love with that product, they click on 6 more related products and they love those products, and they click on 6 more related products and they love those products, and they've been adding things to the cart as they've gone. And they've never clicked on categories. Others, you have to go into category. Like especially if you're selling auto parts and you're looking at tires and brake fluid, sometimes you need to go into categories. So it really depends on that selling proposition and how it relates to how you relate to your audience, and how your audience is trying to find things, how they want to have a shopping experience. We talk about finding things, but we can't forget about that experience part of it. And sometimes it's like walking in AutoZone. I don't want an experience. I want to get what I need and get out. But other times I want to browse. I want somebody to say, oh, well, if you like this, you'll like these other things. I don't want to see all the pottery over here and all the light fixtures over here. I want to see things organized in a way that makes me want to go in and go, I want this whole dining room set the way you've laid it out.
Mm.
So, it really does depend, and that's why I'm saying, like, you have to know your products and what you're selling, as well as your audience.
Mr. Amerland, I'm in the belief that once you've got your structure set out, that even though they may be coming in from a direct link, that initially when you're setting up your breadcrumbs and your ontology, that search engines are saying, okay, red apple is how he's categorizing this for 99 cents, and regardless in the beginning how they got there, something had to understand that is a red apple and it's a fruit.
Absolutely. Well, okay, there are 2 factors here. First of all, certainly we can create ontologies which are governed by our understanding of entities and their attributes, whatever those entities may be. But there's also the usage of things, which creates ontologies in its own right in terms of how things are used, which is also part of the attribute structure of any kind of entity. So really the way, certainly websites shouldn't have a lot of depth, because that tends to work against them. It adds an unnecessary level of complexity. And the bigger the website is, the bigger the challenge in how you actually create as shallow structure as possible. And then the ontology structure that is applied has to be governed by a combination of usage and nature, because that is, again, reflective of an entity. We're not actually circumscribing or circumnavigating any kind of concept here. And that, initially, if there's no usage data, if there are no usage factors you can draw on, certainly you have to start off from somewhere. You always start off from your own understanding of how it should be structured, trying to be always as useful as possible. But the moment data comes in, and David Kay said, what if you have categories which are never visited? Well, if they're never visited, they shouldn't be there. They're not doing anything but taking up, creating barriers which are unnecessary. So find ways to repackage things in a way that actually become very user-friendly and very approachable. The way people use websites has changed. They want things to be as convenient, as easy as possible, because none of us have a lot of time, and a lot of us access websites and make purchasing decisions on the go on mobile devices. We're not at our desks. We don't have a lot of time to go through a website and peer at everything. We have tiny screens and even smaller attention spans. So we need things to be easy, and quick. And that's how we value websites. This is why Amazon wins with its one-click purchase, for instance. This is why a lot of flight companies now have their own apps. You get in and check in and have your onboard pass on your phone on your way to the airport sometimes. This is why Google now is becoming so useful. These are the guidelines that every webmaster, every business person on the web should actually apply. And the moment they apply them, a lot of things begin to fall into place.
Okay, so let's wrap up. And Mr. Kutcher, what are you doing for the month of June?
Oh man, I've got we've got a full pipeline right now, so we're rocking and rolling.
I heard one of your restaurants won an award.
Oh yeah, Juniper and Ivy in San Diego was named best restaurant in San Diego. But we're in the midst of launching their sister restaurant called the Crack Shack. Yes, they sell eggs all day. The Crack Shack.
Okay, yeah, that's fine.
But yeah, we have four restaurant clients lined up, as well as quite a few others, non-restaurants as well. So we have a busy summer and hopefully trying to get some vacation in as well.
Sounds nice. And Mr. Amerland, what are you doing?
Well, the glib line here is I should be working on my tan, but I'm not.
You should be going to bed. I think you said it was under 3 o'clock in the morning.
Well, that's true, but it's not going to happen. I've got a book to finish, which is on a very tight deadline, and it's creating its own difficulties. And I've got quite a few presentations to prepare, because as we get to the tail end of summer, I'll be in sort of several countries within weeks of each other, so I should be ready for that. So that's what I'm trying to do.
Definitely need a vacation. StrikeHawk is going to continue to work and develop on a new theme for PrestaShop and include more structured data. And I think it's going to be important for developers to bond that relationship with people like you, because we need to understand what you need in order to output that product for you. So that's what we're going to be continue working on in June and July.
Great. Okay, sounds really good.
All right, that's going to be a wrap. Looks like we didn't have any comments, and probably because the event messed up in the beginning. Sorry about that, folks. But we'll continue to watch and reshare the video and answer your questions today and into next week. And I want to thank you all for coming out to this hangout. I know you're very busy, and one of you is very sleepy. So I'll go ahead and end now, and have a great day.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.